Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on PDM data migration. My name is Quinton Rocke. I'm an application engineer and data management specialist here at GoEngineer, and thank you for joining us. And just a quick agenda for today. We'll be going through some prereq knowledge, some of the things you need to know, or a little bit of stuff that you should study before you start trying to attempt any kind of data migration, some of the pre-processing and potentially post-processing stuff, the actual data migration process, and then how GoEngineer can help. So my focus on the main content on this will be manually taking data from a Windows directory and putting it into PDM, which is probably the most common scenario. But we do have other services where we might come from an existing PDM type product and migrate that data into PDM Pro. And then we'll end with some Q&A time. So a little bit of prerequisite stuff. Just understanding the file management aspect of SOLIDWORKS. So, assemblies, parts, and drawings are the different file types, but how those relate to each other, how those references are, how SOLIDWORKS searches for those things. And I put a couple links on this slide. And by the way, this webcast will be recorded and posted on our website and YouTube channel. So you'll get a chance to see these slides again. But you kind of want to understand a little bit of this before you go into it, how SOLIDWORKS searches for files, how it gets to it. I put some useful tools on there. There's a program called Treehouse, which kind of will take an assembly and show that. That's built into the SOLIDWORKS, so most of the SOLIDWORKS users will have that already installed. And then inside of SOLIDWORKS, there's something called File, from the File pull-down menu, Find References, and that'll tell you where the files are open. So just being a little bit familiar with some of the file management side of things. There's also a link in here to a training or another YouTube webinar that we did, and that will cover a lot of file management stuff. So I won't spend too much time on actual file management, but it's a good prereq knowledge to have. So as far as the data migration process, it's almost the same no matter how you do it, except that the methods that you might do it are going to be different, and that's what we'll be covering there. But you're always going to take a look at what you have, review the data you got, review where you're going to put it, so the source and the target. And then you're just copying data in and checking it in. Whether you do that in bulk, one by one, those are all different methods to do that, and that's what we'll kind of discuss. Those are required to get the data into PDM. I put this section called optional there because realistically, you're going to have to do one or more of these optional things probably as well. If your data has bad references, a lot of file management issues, then you may end up needing to do some cleanup prior to copying and pasting it in and checking it in. After it gets in there, you're checking it into your initial state in PDM, but it may already be a released file and you need to sort it through the workflow, or it may already have some revisions. Unless you're starting the company today, more than likely you have quite a bit of legacy data that will need to get in there. So we'll kind of touch on some of those concepts as well. So we'll start out with, the first item is reviewing the data. How much data is always a big part. We need to make sure you have the disk space. Is the data all in just one network share? Is it spread across that and everybody's desktop and USB drives and everywhere? So getting a good idea of the amount of data and what's going on with that data is a big part of it. Again, making sure that you have enough disk space in PDM. Remember, all that data you put in PDM is going to use up data on the archive server portion, so making sure the server has the disk space to copy that in. And if you're going to do any kind of pre-processing or staging area, making sure you have that data, that free disk space as well. The other is inside that data, it may be a big network share. It may have Word docs and spec sheets and PDFs and all kinds of images, other types of files, not just the SOLIDWORKS CAD data. Are we bringing all that across? There are tools that you can use to just bring maybe the SOLIDWORKS files out of all those, or the CAD files out of all that. Things like RoboCopy has triggers that you can use for that. What to do about the folder structure? You may or may not want to retain the folder structure from the network location or the big share location, where you may have already set up a PDM vault and have a different folder structure inside there, or you're switching. So all those kinds of things, building a plan for that, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, that's going to be a big part of being prepared for the data migration. And I didn't really put this on there, but also, being able to have some sample sets of the data so that you can do a couple tests before you try and do any kind of big bulk operations. And then also, we don't know the state of that data. Is there a ton of duplicate file names? Is there a bunch of missing references? You know, all that stuff, if you have broken references and you copy and paste that in, PDM doesn't automatically fix that for you. So, you know, what are you going to do about that? Maybe doing some scans on the data. Again, GoEngineer has some tools to scan it, but there's plenty of tools out there that you can find to scan a Windows directory for duplicates. The other thing is, now that we've looked at our data that we're going to bring in and we have an idea of a plan for that, where are we going to put it? What is the vault set up? This list right here is a pretty big list of the things that you're going to want to go through and make sure you have an idea of. Are we going to put it all in? Is this a brand new vault and we're just dumping it in, or is existing vault with a folder structure that we have to put stuff into? We also need to have the permissions to do that. Normally, when you set up a workflow, you have a starting stage or a design stage, then potentially some review stages and an approved or release stage. Where's that data going to go into? Is it going to go into just the initial stage, or is it all going to go into the release stage, review stage? All that kind of stuff needs to be factored in and potentially adjusted temporarily while you bring in the data, and then you can always switch it back over. I'll talk about some more advanced sorting type things that you can do. Probably more of a PDM professional thing, but you can still do a lot of manual stuff with PDM Standard. But all of these things need to be reviewed, and once that's reviewed, then we got the data migration. And there's several different ways to do it. You have a mass dump where we just take big copy, paste, and check in. Again, that doesn't clean up anything, it doesn't fix anything, but it's definitely probably the quickest or the fastest way to get the data in. Probably the second bullet on there, the second main bullet, would be cleaning up the data in advance. Are we going to spend some time fixing all those file management issues? And I joke on there, hire an intern to do it, but that it's slower, but it allows for cleanup. It ensures that the data inside of PDM is accurate, clean. It's able to find all its references. There's no duplicate file names. It's in the right locations on all that. It's a little more involved, but it definitely has a better end result. I'd say in real life, that's the perfect scenario, is probably the middle option there. The other is the line in the sand approach. Is like, hey, just today we're going to start putting stuff in PDM. The stuff we're using today, anything legacy, we still leave on the outside. That's good and bad. If you have a lot of common files, that's you don't want them in two locations. You want a single source of truth for that data. So generally speaking, that's, sometimes you use that, sometimes you don't. But realistically, the last item on here is pretty much a combination of all the above. And we're going to go through some different methods here, but more than likely, you're going to have some kind of combination. You may do some mass stuff to certain directories. Other directories you may go slower through and do a project at a time, that kind of stuff. So we'll go through it all. One tip I put on there is, once you copy something into PDM and you want people to start using it in PDM, you should make sure that they can't use it on the outside anymore. So that I don't say you have to delete it, but maybe rename the directory or unshare the directory if it's a network share, stuff like that. So you make sure that people aren't accidentally pulling the files from the outside still. Tools of the trade here. This is basically some of the tools that you'll see me using. Most of this has to do with getting the data in one at a time, post-processing, some of the cleanup and things. But the set revision, the update references tool, and then just getting data in, which is copy and paste, pack and go, might be your friend, especially if things are spread across multiple directories and you're only trying to pick and choose the data you want to bring in. So all these tools are going to be something you'll see me use a little bit today, but I put some links to some other webcasts where we dive into those even further. So I think that's enough PowerPoint there. Let's jump into some software here. So as we talked about, the first step is looking at what we're actually going to be importing into PDM. So in this case, I've just set up some very simple stuff. It's basically just some simple project structure. It's a mock network share. Obviously, yours is probably going to be a lot bigger and have a lot more data. But just to kind of quickly review, I just have this different variants of the same assembly, similar products, different variants of them. And it's basically just a simple universal join. I have a drawing, I have some stuff filled out in there. I would want to, again, check, the file properties, make sure that I know, do I have enough free disk space and so on. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm keeping it pretty light here. But the things that we want to review are is there other types of files? Are there duplicates in there? I've set up some duplicates, so we'll run into that here in just a minute. But all those types of things are a big part of what you would generally review. And when we have larger directories, we would probably scan those. We wouldn't go one by one like I would do here. I would scan the directories, get a report of that. And again, GoEngineer has some tools to assist with that if you need that. Let's jump over to my admin tool. So the other side of things is checking PDM. Is PDM configured and ready to go? So I'm going to be using this CAD workflow. I'll be putting everything in there. I have work in process, pending approval, and release state. I am going to use the admin user. I assume your admin user has full privileges, but any user you use, make sure that you go to the user, you put them in an admins group, or you elevate them to administration level permissions if you're not using the out-of-the-box admin. The other big thing is, where are we going to put the files? Which state are these going to go in? So by default in PDM, and this isn't an admin webcast, but I've got to go through a few things here. Default in PDM is, the initial state is where everything is going to get checked into. And if you have some conditions, this is PDM Professional, so you can see I have multiple workflows. With PDM Standard, it's a little simpler. You only have the one workflow. But if you have categories and conditions that are sorting things through there, you're not just bringing in CAD files, you're bringing in Word docs and PDFs and other things, and those need to go to different workflows, just double checking all that. Also, I could, if I wanted to just say I want to put everything in released, I could temporarily come in here and say switch the initial state to released. And that way, when I check stuff in, it's going to go all into released, and I may not have to sort it all through there. So those are things, I'm not going to do that right now for this initial copy, but those are things that you definitely want to review. Make sure it's going to the right spot. Duplicate file names, are you allowing duplicate file names? Or do you not allow duplicate file names? Or do you only allow them for certain extensions? So checking that kind of data to make sure we do that. More than likely, you have a lot of duplicate file names, or you have at least some duplicate file names. So when you copy and paste it, it's not going to let you check in anything that doesn't have a unique name. Or, well, the first file will get in, but anything after that is not going to get in. If you allow duplicates temporarily while you copy that in and then you shut it off, what happens is you have those duplicates in there, which is not the best file management practice, but PDM actually allowed them to be put in and checked in with duplicate file names. And then as soon as if you disable that after you've copied in duplicates, when you try and check in something again, the next time you try and check it in, it's going to block it. It's not going to let you check in that file again with a duplicate name. So it's going to stop you. You're going to have to rename one of the parts, or if they're both the same part, potentially fix the references and point both assemblies or both whatever referencing files to the same thing. So I'll say not allow duplicates for the sake of this, because that's probably the most common thing that we want to do. The other thing, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the data cards themselves, you'll want to check your data cards, make sure that these fields are actually linked to the variables. Do the variables have the right spelling and all that? Because the way these data cards work is they get populated when you check in files. And since we're going to be doing a lot of check-in as part of the migration, these will all get filled out for you if the links are good. If the links are bad and you change it after you've migrated all the data, then it doesn't populate until you do the next PDM operation on those. So next time you check out a file, work on it and check it in, it'll update the data card. But you kind of want those data cards to be updated as you're bringing it in there. So checking those attributes, making sure that those variables are linked properly is a big part of what you'll want to do. Revision scheme, it's not required just to put the data in there to set the revisions or make sure that the revisions are in sync, but knowing what you're going to, having the revision scheme, more than likely some of the files have already been released and you're going to want to set those revisions. So making sure the state that you put the files into has a revision scheme, and you can set the revision in those states. You have permissions to what they call set revision. I look at my admin user here. So I have the ability to set revision in the release state. Actually, I was going to go into work in progress, but that's the same thing. I have the options to do that as an admin. You can only set revisions for the state the file's in. So if you have multiple revision schemes, keep that in mind. You can only use the set revision command. It's only going to work on the actual scheme that the state the file's in. And each state can only have one revision scheme. So there may be some moving around that you have to do to actually set all the revisions as well. There's more things to setting up a vault and making sure it's ready, but that's kind of the, the gist of it. Jumping back to our my vault here. So I'm going to be putting everything into just my projects folder. And so as we talked about some of the simple things, we'll go to my network share here, is I can take, my projects, copy them, and paste them in. So I've gone through all my prereqs, I'm ready to go. I go and I try and paste it in. So this is kind of the mass dump approach. Now, I don't allow duplicate file names. It's going through, it's checking as much of the references as you can. This is a great way to do this because it's also, even if these things are pointing to multiple directories and all that, if you're dumping all those in at the same time, it will maintain all those references for you. Because everything I doubt is always going to be in the same folder, right? All the references and everything that could be spread across multiple folders, multiple network locations as well. And what this has done is it's warned me. Because I have duplicate files disabled, I can't have duplicate file names, it's giving me a list of the duplicates in there. So I haven't checked this in. This is kind of handy. This is one way to test how many duplicates you have, is to just try copy paste it in. You could always cancel, and delete what you copied in there before you check it in. But this gives you a list, and this can actually be exported too. So, you may have thousands of files and maybe 20, 100, whatever number of duplicates. So you can export this list, go through those, clean those up. If we go through, I can click on the different ones here, and you can click on these like actual links and see the different locations for where these things are. But basically I have some non-unique files there. It opened up and it shows you where they are. So while that dialog box is up, these are actually like hyperlinks to these things. So I know I have some duplicates. If I just go ahead and check those in, any of the stuff that's duplicate won't get checked in. So if I, let's refresh that real quick. If let's just say I want to try and check in the first project, and I can do this in bulk, but I'll just check in the first project. That's going to go in just fine. But you can see that because some of these files have unique, and it warned me in there, by the way, I skipped that. These files can't get checked in. When I go to try and check this in, it's just not going to let me because I don't allow unique file names. So that would be a problem as other users try and open these assemblies. The file's not actually in PDM that it needs to reference. Again, this is like a hyperlink. You can click on it. It'll bring up that dialog again. You can export the list if need be. So this, in this case, is not really a great way to bring it across because we're going to have to go through and clean up all these duplicates. If we temporarily allow duplicates, that would get it in there, but that really doesn't solve the problem of duplicate file names, right? So be careful there. So what I'll do is let's try this again in a different approach and look at more of kind of a project at a time. So I'm just going to delete what I just put in there. I'll control drag or copy and paste just the first project, and that it'll do its check again. There will be no duplicates because, oh, actually there is one duplicate. And so it's pointing to a bracket in another location for one of my other projects that I have here. So in this case, it's just one part. I know it's in this folder here. And we'll go into here, and actually I believe it said it was in the emails file. So I actually didn't plan this, but so yeah, so there's a part called bracket here that's in use. So because this is already an existing one, renaming this might be the simplest method, right? And then now it's not a unique name. However, if they're the same component, I would rather point to it. So what I should be doing is actually coming here, checking the preview and seeing if this bracket, or maybe even opening it up in SOLIDWORKS. This doesn't look like much of a bracket to me, and then going to the one that I'm trying to put in and comparing those. And if they are the same bracket, which definitely we can see by the preview, they're definitely not the same bracket. So one of them has to be renamed. Maybe they need a new part number. Whatever. If they are the same ones, then I'd want to point to the correct one. So now that I've renamed that one to, and again, don't just put a 1 after it, name it to what you're supposed to name it. I can go ahead and check this in. It's not giving me, I get some warnings about rebuild, but it's not stopping me from checking anything in. You might put in a comment like migrated, or something like that, migrated by or anything on there. You're going to see all that in the history anyway, but having some comments always helps, right? This is a test data, so I want to check, is it filling out description? Is it filling out some of the other items in there? So that's the first project I got in there. As I bring in my next project, which I know has some duplicates, and it's warning me that there are some duplicate file names in there. So it's saying the pin and the spider already exist. Now I'm certain, you can take my word for it, that these are the same parts as the one from Project A because I set this up on purpose that way. But definitely, again, you'd want to compare and make sure that those are duplicates and not just two different parts with the same name. So in this case, when I go and I want to check this Project B in, and I'm going to make this a little bigger here, I know that it's the pin and the spider that are duplicates. If I forgot, I can always try and check this in again, and it'll give me that list again of which ones are the duplicates. And again, these are hyperlinks that I could click to, so it'll show me where those are, where the duplicates are. But in this case, again, I know those. So probably your number one tool when you're going to migrate data is this update references. And that's what you're going to use to fix references before you check in the files. Or you could check them back out and fix them, but generally speaking, you want to try and do this as you're checking it in for the initial time. So what I can do is go to a top level, like the assembly or the drawing or something like that, and just run the update references on that. If these were just components in a subassembly, I could go down into there. But you can see that, okay, here's all the components in there right now. But these pin and spider, are not the ones that I want to use. I want to use those from Project A. Those are common files that I'm going to reuse. And it might make sense to actually take those out of Project A and put them in like a common location and then point to them, but either way. So what I have to do here is, you'll see there's some different buttons here. And once you've used this tool a few times, it's pretty easy to get it down. But I can come in here and I can say, okay, I want to find any files that also have the name pin in there. And I happen to know it's in Project A, but I could go and search the entire vault. I could search subfolders or only search for selected files. So I have highlighted pin, so I'm only going to search for pin and not other duplicates. But I could quickly just say, search the entire vault for any files that are already there with some names. You can see that, it's got these ones have 2 matches. When I click on this, it looks like it's grayed out, but when I click on it, I can see, oh, I'm going to switch that over to A. The other method here is, since I know it's only a few of them, I can do a find, or I can just manually replace these. So I could say, okay, let's replace pin with pin in Project A. And you can see now it's pointing to A. The other thing that you may end up having to do, let's go back to our Project A, is setting the revision of these components. So now that I've got them in there, they're all in the work in process state. I could have put it into released. I may want to change that. I may want to push them all over to like released. I may want to make some temporary transitions, and they don't really do any actions. They don't bump the revision. They don't do anything, but they're just for sorting. They're just to get around the workflow, so I don't have to go through 5 or 6 different states before I get to where I want to put it. I might just have like some sorting transitions that I've temporarily added. In this case, I want to set the revisions. So you see that these all have rev values, but they don't actually have rev values. When I look at the history of this file, there's no revision A stamped in there. That's because the file property called revision was filled out in advance. What I need to do is actually stamp the revision in there so that when it goes through the approval process, it goes to B rather than going to A, the very first value on the list. So as far as PDM is concerned, these files have no revision. Sure, there's a value in the revision property for the file, but it actually doesn't have a revision stamp on it yet. So what you could do again from the top level, you could do a shift select or a box select. You can, however you want to do it. Again, permissions granted, I'm in there. And I've already checked that the revision scheme matches what I want. I can run what's called the set revision tool. And any of these that I check are going to set. Now, by default, it wants to go to the next revision value, which is just A in this case, because these, according to PDM, these files have never been in there. They never got a PDM revision. But as you can see, the data card value column already shows that. So there's a couple tricks you can do here. While in this tool, I can right-click and say, just update everything that I have checked to set rev, update it with whatever the data card value says. So if I click that, it quickly comes through. Did I click the right one? Oh, I'm sorry, set all new revisions. I said set data card value, which is this column called update variable, which I will explain. But basically it's saying, okay, look at the data card and just stamp it as that. So instead of having to go through this huge list of 100 parts or 1,000 parts, I can just quickly right-click and say, if the data card has a value that matches the revision scheme, set it to that. So that way you don't have to, it's in sync. I don't have to set it to go to each one manually. However, values like these, like here's one where there is no data card value, and it's telling me that. So these files have never been revisioned yet, or they didn't have a value yet. They were blank. So that one I may not want to set. I may just, it's just an InDesign component. It hasn't been approved yet. It'll just go to A normally through PDM. Then we have some maybe some files that were in a different revision scheme. Maybe we have a temporary revision scheme, maybe we don't. In this case, I'm just going to say, okay, it had Rev 2, so I'm going to set that to B moving forward. This one had X1, which was an old scheme we used maybe 10 years ago or something, so I'm just going to set that to A. And that's where this column kind of comes into play here, this update variable. Because now you're setting the revision and you also want to write that value back into the file. In the case of these first few where it says A, I don't need to write that back into the file because it's already got A in there. It doesn't hurt if I check that, but I really don't need to. I just need to set the counter value to A so that the next time it'll go to B. So any of these that are already have an actual value in there isn't going to really help me to set that. Whether I check this or not, it's not going to make any difference. However, these ones where it used to say 2, if I wanted to now say B when I set it to B, I need to check this box. If I wanted to say A when I need to check this box. So those are probably the only 2 that I want to do. Again, if I don't want to set the revision, I can just simply uncheck this set revision column. Always put in a comment, set revision on migrated data or something like that, just so you have something in there. And now, when I click OK to this, it doesn't look like much has changed here. Some of those X1 and the 2 have been removed when I refresh there. But when I go into any one of these files and I look at the history of it, now I see that hard stamp. I see it's at B. This is why you might want to put in some comments there. And if I move this through the workflow, so if I submit it for a review, and I'll just ignore notifications and comments right now, but obviously that's a good thing to put in. And I release this file, it goes to C. So setting the revision, even though that's kind of an optional step, it's probably going to be something you need to do, at least for released files that you're hoping to do that. Now, if you're completely switching revision schemes, let's say you used X1, X2, X3, and now we're going to go to A, B, C, then it may not be needed. Everything can just start going to A from here on out, right? But those are all some methods. So again, some big tools, the update references tool to fix references, fix the pointers, fix duplicate files pointing to the right, common file locations, and the set revision are all going to be kind of your best friends when you do this. So your process again is copy the data in, check it in. If you need to, do the update references prior, set the revision, and push it through the workflow to wherever it needs to go. Seems pretty simple. Obviously, there's a lot more different scenarios, what happens with missing files, all those types of things. But those update reference tool, as you start using that more and more, you'll see it's pretty easy. And once the first few may be a little rough, but once you've done this a few times, it's pretty quick. It goes a lot faster. Let me go back to my slide just for time's sake here. I want to mention there are some other things that you might potentially find some value in here, and that's some advanced sorting stuff. PDM Pro it gives you a lot more options. So you can see by the screenshot here on the slide is basically I've set up kind of like a migrated workflow. then I just want to take files, dump them in, and have them go through this workflow and push to the right locations. But there, again, you might end up setting up some temporary transitions inside your workflow. With PDM Standard, you can still do most of this. PDM Standard doesn't have the automatic transitions, which you see in red there. You actually have to manually push things through the transitions. But what I can do is set up conditions and set this up. So this is just a sample. This isn't maybe going to work for everybody, but we can tailor a custom workflow or something for you that might make it very easy to migrate this stuff. Or if you have an admin there or been through the admin training class, you might be able to set this up yourself as well. Either way, let's take a look at that workflow, which is, so I've made a migration and sorting workflow, just like the screenshot there. And basically what I've done is I put some conditions on here that says if the revision field, not the revision value for PDM, because there isn't a revision value. That's important to note. This field right here is the PDM revision. This field down here is just the property called revision that I'm going to link them to. But that, because the data is coming in, this is the one that I want to use. I'm saying this equals A, push it through this one. If rev equals B, I put a condition on there that says if the revision value is B, push it through this transition. So an A can't go down this one, a C can't go down this one, only the B can go down. I also have some actions to like increment the revision as it goes through. And I've done it in a sort of a backwards way here. I'm incrementing it and I'm setting it as part of the transition, just because what I want it to do is write in the history the actual rev value rather than just incrementing the counter and not seeing it in the history. It may not make a ton of sense unless you kind of walk through this, and I've only set it up for A, B, C. You may have multiple ones. You may have conditions that anything that X1 and A goes to A, anything with X2 and B goes to, and so on. Anything that doesn't have a revision, I'm saying just shoot it over to there. So with what automatic transitions do, again, this is only PDM Pro, but what automatic transitions do is they said if the conditions are met, go straight through. And I'm just saying if the revision's blank, just push it through. The other thing I have to do is I've locked, this is only a temporary workflow. It's mainly just used for migration, sorting, that kind of stuff. You may even use it for doing some of the set rev and then push it over to the other workflow through these workflow links. So I have a condition that says don't allow files in there. I need to get rid of that condition so I can start doing that. I also want to go over to my CAD workflow and make sure files don't go into that just temporarily while I'm copying that data in. So I'm going to say not equal to anything. Oops, not equal to anything. This way I'm putting a property on here that says the file path can't have a file path, and since everything has a file path, we're not using that. So now when I check in CAD files, at least, they're going to go into this migrated state. As soon as they get checked in, they'll go straight through these conditions if I've set this up correctly. Where's my network share here? So I have a file that's sorting. And these components, it's just a different assembly, a very small one. But these files right here have revision values already in them, either A, B, or C, or no revision at all, right? So I can take this entire project, copy and paste it, or drag and drop it, however I want to get it into PDM. In this case, I'll just put it in the projects folder here. And I'll paste that in. And now, when it checks in, it's going to go pretty quick here. When I check this in, so they haven't been checked in yet, it's going to go and you can see the different revision values. So the component 19 doesn't have a value. That should go to InDesign, but the ones that have already been revved should all go to released, right? So when I check this in, it's going to go through those automatic transitions and go to the right states and stamp the revisions for me, right? If I set this up right. So again, data migration, some comments in there better than what I type in. As soon as I check it in, if it meets the conditions, it goes straight through those automatic transitions and over to the CAD thing. So even though these all got checked into the sorting and workflow because of those automatic transitions and conditions and everything that I set up, I pushed it right over to where it needs to go. Now that migration workflow, obviously I only set it up for ABC, right? But you might have a lot more stuff in there. It may take quite a bit of time to build that, or you may even contract GoEngineer to help build that for you. But those types of things. The one that didn't have a revision went to work in progress. if we look at some of the history of this, we're going to see what happened. And it did get the stamp A, and that's why I ran that increment revision command so that I'd actually get this. And again, this is one scenario. Obviously, there's going to be other ones. The B went to B. I'm sorry, the C went to C, and so on. And any comments that I put in, all that kind of stuff, I can automate some of that as well. Just to kind of end some of this stuff, how can GoEngineer help? Well, we have PDM services. Many of you have probably used our initial implementation services, but there's a lot of additional things that you can have. Usually the initial implementation, you start using it for a while, then you want to expand into the other things or bring in other types of documents. If you have PDM Pro, you may want to set up other sites, replication, other workflows, all that, or just some help, setting up a workflow for data migration, setting up the cards, those types of things we can offer. We have official data migration services too. So I personally do a lot of stuff from the old workgroup PDM application, migrating some of that data over, but we have some very talented people on our team that can do custom programming. So there can be a lot of options when it comes to doing that data migration. And then, obviously all our training, tech support, webcasts, all those types of things are available as well. All that starts on goengineer.com. And so, or any contact you have for us, reach out to it. I'll go ahead and end it here. Again, feel free to reach out if you think of anything afterwards, and always consider GoEngineer your resource for everything. Thank you again for attending.